Buying the dip. Does it actually work? Well, at the first glance, it sounds like a fantastic strategy. Historically, the US stock market has eventually recovered every single major correction. So buying right when the market is crashing makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But what sounds really simple gets surprisingly complicated under the hood really fast. So let's examine what the research actually shows and build a simple set of rules that you can follow in the next market crash. Because it's not about if there is another market crash, it's about when that crash will happen and how you will react to it. Hi and welcome to the Money Matters MD show. I'm your host Dr. Abhishek Gadre. I'm a practicing physician and let's run a little experiment today. So let's test a hypothetical market crash and design a way to try to buy into the dip and see how the numbers actually play out. Just to remember, this is not financial advice, this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's say you start with a $100,000 portfolio invested 100% in equities and you get a 10% a month market crash and it dips all the way down to 60% over the course of 6 months and then smoothly recovers over the next 6 months up all the way back to 100%, 10% each month. So this will be similar to a worst market crash in history, similar to the 2007-2009 global financial crisis, which lost around 57% from peak to trough. So let's compare this with the 80-20 asset allocation where you're 80% equities and 20% fixed income. Now, because you're a bit more conservative here, you will do better in the market correction. And all the way down, you will have a little bit lower drawdown at the bottom of the market. And when the market recovers, you will actually come out ahead. So you'll come out with $104,000. You will be 4% ahead of a 100% equity portfolio in this scenario. So just holding a 80-20 fixed allocation passive portfolio, you actually did better compared to a 100% equity portfolio. So that's the importance of having an asset allocation adjusted to your own risk appetite. Now let's compare it to a buying the dip strategy. So here's the red line. So let's say you design a strategy where you start buying into the dip when the market goes down by 20%. So instead of 80-20, now you're 85-15. And if it goes down to 30%, you're 90-10. Down to 40%, you're 95-5. And at a 50% crash, you're 100% equities. You've completely run out of your dry powder. And let's say the market continues to crash down to 60% and you stay 100% equities. And on the way back up, as the market recovers, you just buy back in the same way you sold it down. So for all of this engineering, how did you actually do? So if you run the numbers, you actually come out a little bit ahead. You come out $105,000 at the end of the recovery period. So you're 1% better than the fixed 80-20 allocation. You did way better than the 100% equities, of course. But for all of this engineering and all of this effort and stress that you might have to go through and trying to time the market compared to a completely passive strategy which beat the market by 4%, all you got was just 1% alpha. And the question is, was it worth it and how practical is it in the real world? Well, it turns out in the real world, buying the dip doesn't look so clean. So these are highly emotional and visceral periods to live through. Remember going back to 2007, 2009, 57% market correction. All the news around you is going to be really, really bad. And you will try to, against your instinct, buy in to the market more and more. So it's really hard to stay rational in this type of circumstance. And market can actually have a much more prolonged drawdown and it might take several years for you to recover. So at a practical level, it actually gets really, really complicated really fast. So you need to answer a lot more questions. So what's exactly your benchmark? Are you using S&P 500? Are you using the total world? Are you using a balance benchmark? And what exact metric are you looking at? Are you looking at peak to fall? And how frequently are you doing the math? Are you doing it every day when you get up? Are you doing it twice a day? Are you doing it once a week? Or is once a month enough? And you have to design your custom buy the dip rules. Now, this was just one example of how you could design a buy the dip rule. You'll also have to come up with a sell the recovery rule on your way up. And turns out most DIY investors won't be able to do this correctly. You can even make it more complicated by adding some market valuation thresholds. So let's say arbitrarily you're going to say at a certain CAPE ratio, you're going to start selling off your stocks and buying more into bonds. And when the CAPE ratio comes down to a certain number, you're going to buy back your equities. So that'd be another way of running a dynamic asset allocation strategy. So it turns out we're not the first people who have thought about this idea or are talking about it. Buying the dip has been discussed for decades, and it has actually been extensively researched. There's a company called AQR Research. It stands for Applied Quantitative Research. They're one of the largest and most respected financial research firms who study this dynamic asset allocation strategy. And they don't deal with individual investors. They only manage large institutional money, but they do publish their research openly in peer-reviewed journal articles, just like medical research is published. So AQR is a bunch of extremely brilliant, super nerdy quantitative researchers, a lot of mathematicians, statisticians, and market analysts. And you as a DIY investor can't really come close to emulating what AQR can actually do. And even AQR doesn't actually guarantee that you'll beat the market. So one of the most recent research papers from AQR published in 2025, what they found is they examined 196 different ways to buy the dip. So for example, we just tested one buying the dip set of rules. They actually tested 196 such set of rules, and they tested it through a holding period of about last 60 years. Now, it turns out 60% of those buy the dip rules out of the 196 actually did way worse than just owning the S&P 500 outright. The average risk-adjusted return, which is the Sharpe ratio, was actually worse by 16%. And just passively holding equities beat the average buy the dip strategy by approximately 1.1% annually. And only 16 out of 196 strategies actually had some amount of alpha. And when they applied some statistical corrections on top of it, they actually found no statistical difference at all. Now, I am adding a new Q&A section towards the end of my videos. If you'd like to submit a question for the Q&A section, just type Q&A in the comments and type your question. Now, overall, I think about 3 different styles when it comes to asset allocation. The first one is a fixed asset allocation. Second one would be a dynamic asset allocation. And third one would be non-believers. We'll talk about them last. So fixed one is quite easy to understand. So let's say you're an 80-20 asset allocation between stocks and bonds. Maybe you're a 60-40, and you're just going to keep it fixed regardless of what the market does. That's what a fixed asset allocation looks like. The second type would be a dynamic asset allocation, where you're changing your asset allocation based on some parameter. Now, the most common dynamic asset allocation would be following a glide path way of doing it. So if you're following a target date fund, or you have a robo-advisor, or you have designed your own glide path. Now, if you're in your accumulation phase and you're slowly moving towards financial independence and retirement, and you're hitting all those different milestones, you might want to design progressively getting a little bit more conservative, let's say 1% per year, buying more bonds and selling equities. Now, a second way of doing a dynamic asset allocation would be a strategic asset allocation. Now, let's say the market valuations go extremely, extremely high, something like today, and you start getting really, really worried, and you decide that you're going to de-risk a little bit or maybe a lot. And depending on how worried you are, you might change your asset allocation to a more conservative number, and that would be a strategic asset allocation. Now, a third way to do an asset allocation would be a tactical asset allocation. So this is the most active the management of a portfolio can get. You're really trying to make close calls on timing the market, and you're dealing maybe even with single stocks. You're trading in and out of positions really quickly. Maybe you're even using leverage. That's what tactical asset allocation looks like. Now, the third big category was the non-believers in asset allocation. Now, these are people who don't believe in fixed income at all. They just basically want to stay invested 100% in equities throughout all their lifetimes. And I'll just give you an example. Dave Ramsey is a big example of somebody who basically doesn't believe in asset allocation. He recommends just staying 100% invested in stocks all along. I don't necessarily agree with that. So you basically have to choose your own adventure out of all of these options that I talked about. So the question is, how do you really determine what your asset allocation really should be? So there's multiple different questionnaires you can use. You can go to Fidelity or Vanguard. They all have their own questionnaires. It basically helps determine your risk appetite and how much market correction that you can really actually tolerate. So I'll show you a graph. It goes from 100% equities all the way to 0% equities and 100% fixed income portfolio. And you will see on 100% equities, you can have a crash of 43% in the worst possible circumstance, and you can gain more than 50% in the best possible year. Now, let's say you're more conservative, you want to be a 60-40, which is very common asset allocation. At the 60% equity mark, your portfolio will crash a lot less. Instead of having a 43% dip, you might actually only see a 26% dip. Well, that comes at the cost of when the market actually does really well. So instead of having that 54% best performing year, you might actually only perform 36% in the best possible year. But the average return of a 60-40 portfolio is at 8.8% historically, as opposed to 10.3% of a 100% equity portfolio. Now, let's take an example of somebody who's 70 years old, they have no income, they're already in retirement. Can they actually handle a 43% downturn if they have a 100% equity portfolio? Maybe they can if they have a really, really large portfolio. In that case, asset allocation really doesn't even matter if you have so much money. If you have a really low burn rate, if you have a really large portfolio and you're only spending like 2 or 3% annualized withdrawal rate, then it doesn't matter. But for most people, spending a significant amount of their portfolio and they don't have an incredibly large portfolio, asset allocation actually does matter a lot more when you're spending down the portfolio. It doesn't matter as much maybe in the accumulation phase, but it matters incredibly more in the spending down phase. Now, one of the best books ever written on asset allocation is The Intelligent Asset Allocator by Dr. William Bernstein. And I highly, highly, highly respect Dr. Bernstein for his work. And I absolutely love this book. So this is very nerdy, a little bit more mathematical. If you enjoy stuff like that, go ahead and buy it. It was written back in 1999, so before the dot-com bubble peaked. A very interesting time compared to where we are today. We don't know what the market's going to do, but it's still relevant till date. And I'm actually excited to announce that Dr. Bernstein himself will be here on the show in September. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Now, another way to think about optimal asset allocation is maybe trying to stress test your portfolio. I'll give you a medical analogy. If you're having chest pain, don't wait for a heart attack. Go get a stress test to figure out if there is a problem underlying and if something can be fixed in advance. If you stress test your portfolio and you don't like the results, say 43% drawdown in a case of a 100% equity portfolio, if you don't like that, maybe it's time for you to de-risk a little bit. If you're in the accumulation phase and you can probably just live through that, that's totally fine. You can even actually plug in the list of your ETFs and try testing it in an AI model and testing it in different market scenarios. And it'll give you some kind of crude estimate. It won't be accurate. Nobody can really predict the future. But you can stress test your portfolio a few different ways. Now, at the end of the day, we talked about so many things. The question is, what should you really do? Well, I don't really have an answer for what you should do. You really need to determine what you need to do yourself. You need to do your own research and figure out what you can live with. Most people will just benefit from having a fixed asset allocation strategy, maybe a more dynamic one. If you want to follow a glide path, especially as you accumulate more assets, you want to add a little bit more protection as you're getting older. So if the market falls, you'll naturally drift down in your equity allocation and you could just rebalance, which means you'll naturally sell some of your bonds and buy into the dip in a more controlled fashion. Now, if you're really going to opt into a strategic asset allocation strategy, I think you need to prepare and have a predetermined set of rules and stick with them during a dip. Now, here's an example of a few set of rules you can design if you plan on indulging in a strategic asset allocation and trying to buy a dip type strategy. Now, rule number one, don't do it with single stocks. If a single stock, say Tesla, crashes by 50%, don't try to go after it. I think that's a difficult decision to make, but it might be a very painful one. I would just do this with broad indexes. It's a completely different story if the entire S&P 500 is down 50%. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often, but if it does, maybe you want to design a strategy in advance. Now, rule number 2 is I would put some guardrails around how much equity you would buy or sell in either direction. So, for example, if you're a 60-40 portfolio, you don't want to drift all the way to 100% equities or 100% cash or 100% bonds. I think that's a poor decision making. I would probably just stay within a 5% plus minus range. So if you're a 60% equities, maybe you can go all the way up to 65 and go all the way down to 55 equities. Generally stay in that range. And rule number 3 is identify your benchmark in advance and determine what thresholds you're going to use and how exactly you're going to carry out this drift, and stick to it when the time actually comes. Now, this is a lot of work. So let's just say there's a 1-year period of market correction and there's 365 days in that year. You're getting up every day and asking yourself, are you going to buy into the dip today or not? And you really have to get it right twice. You have to figure out where the top is and you have to figure out where the bottom is. And the statistical likelihood or the probability of you getting it right twice over a 365-day period is extremely, extremely low. Now, if you're waiting for a major downturn, and we get maybe one every 10 years, thankfully, you're basically sitting around with excess cash to try to time the market. Now, what ends up happening is you end up having a lot of cash drag because you don't know exactly when this market is going to crash. Now, most people lose most of their money, not while buying the dip, but the duration while they're waiting for the dip to actually arrive. Let that sink in a little bit. It's really interesting. At the end of the day, sticking to a simple fixed asset allocation gives you peace of mind. You don't have to get up every day and ask yourself that question if you're going to buy or sell. You're just going to keep rebalancing all along. I recently interviewed the creator of the 4% rule, Bill Bengen, who's really worried about the market. And he actually talked about a strategic asset allocation strategy that he practices. Now, if you're interested, you can go check out the video. It's on my homepage. Now, I also recently had a really interesting conversation with Christine Benz from Morningstar on my channel. If you're interested, again, you can find it on the homepage. She's also worried about the current market valuations, and we discussed asset allocation strategies and what people should do and what investors should do and what should they not do. The founder of Vanguard, Jack Bogle, once said, if somebody came to you and said, we're in the middle of a market crash, don't just stand there, do something. He just goes back and says, don't do something, just stand there. So I always remember that saying from him. Now, the Q&A question for today says, I noticed you tend to incline towards Avantis funds. Any reason? Now, that's an interesting question. Well, Avantis is a firm which was born out of Dimensional, and Dimensional is a firm which was born out of Vanguard. So Vanguard and Dimensional were born back in the 70s together. Now, Dimensional bases their investment philosophy based on research from French and Fama 5-factor model. So French and Fama were the original researchers who actually came up with factor investing, meaning investing in stocks who are more value-oriented, maybe small size-oriented, tend to give better returns compared to the average of the market over an extremely long time horizon. Now, Dimensional came up with a more active investment strategy where they would tilt their portfolios towards these factors. Now, these Dimensional funds were actually just mutual funds which are only available to individual investors if you go through a financial advisor and pay them an asset under management fee. Now, a lot of people at Dimensional were not comfortable with the idea. More recently, some of them actually quit and said, well, maybe we should just design ETFs, which any individual investor can buy through their brokerage account. And that's how Avantis actually came about. And Dimensional later on, just to compete and stay relevant, they came up with their own ETFs as well. So Dimensional is much older. Avantis is newer, but Avantis is the first one who actually came up with the factor-tilted ETFs from the French and Fama research. Now, if you're interested to take a deeper dive into how I design my own portfolio, I have a whole video series called 4-Quadrant Portfolio, and you can find it on my homepage. Now, if you learned something useful today, please subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm quite a bit. Most of you viewers out there are not my subscribers right now. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below and like and share this video. Thank you for watching Money Matters MD. Over and out.